Hey, what's going on, AP Gov people? We have a brief video for you today on the Federalist Papers. We're going to focus on numbers 10 and 51, both written by Madison. Out of all the Federalist Papers, these are two of the most important Federalist Papers, and the chances of you seeing them on your exam in May is pretty good. So definitely be familiar with these two papers. All right, so let's talk about what were the Federalist Papers. Well, there were 85 essays written by three gentlemen: Alexander Hamilton, right here, James Madison here, and John Jay down there. Alexander Hamilton goes on to be the first Treasury Secretary, James Madison goes on to be the fourth president, and John Jay is the first Chief Justice in U.S. history. So what was the purpose of these papers? Well, they were written to gain support for the U.S. Constitution, especially in New York. Now, there's really little evidence that these papers influenced the New York legislature to actually ratify the Constitution, which was the purpose of it, but the papers are instrumental because they give a really good insight into the framers' minds. And this is where they explain in 85 different essays really what the Constitution is all about. So let's focus on Federalist number 10 first. Again, you absolutely positively have to know this. This was written by James Madison. So what is his main argument of the essay? If it could be summarized in one word, that word would be factions. So your next question may be, what is a faction? Well, here's what Madison said. It is a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or interest. In other words, it is a group of people who share similar ideas. A lot of times you'll hear that factions mean political parties, and a political party could be an example of that, but factions don't just mean political parties. It is just simply a group of people united by similar ideas. And you see citizens there as well. So citizens sharing a common impulse of passion or something in common. So what is the cause of factions according to Madison? He would argue that most common and durable source of factions has been the various and unequal distribution of property. And property does not just mean land here. It is essentially a person's wealth. So he's saying the reason why there's so many differences is because of unequal distribution of property or wealth. By the way, I have links in the description where you can actually download Federalist 10 and 51 and look at the exact quotes that I've taken from here. And Madison argued that the cause of factions cannot be removed, and the relief is only to be sought in the means of controlling its effects. So you can't get rid of factions. He's saying they're inevitable. You can't get rid of them. You can't fix the causes of them, but you can fix the effects of them. And he argued that factions are inevitable, they are unavoidable, and they are bound to happen no matter what. So what he wants to focus on is how to control these factions. We can't fix that they're here, but we can fix the effects of them. That's what Madison was arguing. And he said if it's a minority faction, just simply voting can fix it. You can vote and outvote the minority. If a minority group of people come in control, well, next time there's an election, you get rid of them. If it's a majority faction, he argued that a large republic can fix it, and the idea that you would vote for representatives who would have the knowledge to kind of fix this. All right, let's jump over to Federalist paper number 51, again written by James Madison. If you could summarize the main argument of the essay into a couple words, you would say separation of powers. And why was he in favor of separation of powers? Well, his argument was to the preservation of liberty. It is evident that each department should have a will of its own and consequently should be constituted that the members of each should have as little agency as possible in the appointment of the members of the others. So in other words, three different branches of government having as little control over the other one as possible. Rather, they have their own separate things, and there's ways to check them, but their main goal is not to control the other one. So let's talk about the judicial department. He argues that permanent tenure, in other words, judges serving for life, must soon destroy all sense of dependence on the authority conferring them. So why are judges appointed for life according to Federalist 51? It's so that they are not dependent on the people appointing them. If your job is for 5 years, so you're appointed in 5-year terms, you are dependent on somebody to appoint you. So you may make rulings as a judge to make sure that you make those people happy that are appointing you. And Madison says, forget that. They should be appointed for life, and they're not worrying about pleasing the people that appointed them. They're simply interpreting the Constitution as it is. And judges are appointed for life, so they're not influenced by other branches. And again, here's John Jay. He would go on to be the first Chief Justice, although he did not serve for life. He served for a very short time, actually. The legislative branch, Madison stated, in Republican governments, the legislative authority necessarily predominates. And if you look at the Constitution, the legislative branch is the first branch mentioned in the Constitution. The framers really thought the legislative branch should be the most predominant of the three branches. And Madison argued to divide the legislature into different branches, which we have in Congress with the House of Representatives and the Senate. And the House and Senate, and they each have specific duties and rules. For example, in the House, all revenue bills must start there, and in the Senate, they are the experts on foreign policy, so all treaties must be approved in the Senate. So even within the legislative branch, he is arguing of a separation of powers and dividing up even more. So then he throws this term out, usurpation. So you should be familiar with it. So usurpation simply means an illegitimate claim to power. So somebody coming along and taking power that doesn't belong to them. If you watch Game of Thrones, I just got into Game of Thrones recently. It's a great show. They call one of the kings the usurper, and they're saying that he is an illegitimate king, that he came to power illegitimately. That was King Robert Baratheon, the first of his name, I believe. It's a great show. Anyway, how would the government guard against usurpations? Well, again, he focuses on the division of government into distinct and separate departments. So even if, let's say, the president, we had somebody who was able to usurp the presidency, there's still two other branches that can check against that. So in separation of powers, one person can't come and take all the power in the government because it is three different branches. And this idea of separation of powers was influenced by this guy, Baron de Montesquieu, an Enlightenment thinker. Absolutely, positively know this dude. So why divide the government? Again, finally, to guard one part of the society against the injustice of the other part. So if one of the branches is doing something bad, the other two branches can do their own thing and kind of check it and make sure that it doesn't get too bad. All right, let's focus on some test tips for you. Multiple choice, Federalist 10. If you see these in multiple choice, be able to identify the word factions, a group of people with similar interests. Also know that Madison argued that factions are undesirable, but they are inevitable. They are bound to happen. And Federalist Papers number 51. That is all focused on separation of powers. And it's not just the three branches of government, but he talks about federalism as well, which we'll talk about in chapter 3 of the American Government textbook. And this is the division of power between state and federal governments. If you see a free response, be able to explain ways that factions can be limited. I talked about that a little bit earlier, and also read Federalist 10 to arm yourself with knowledge to show the test readers. All right, that is everything you need to know about the Federalist Papers numbers 10 and 51. I thank you guys very much for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the section below, or you can ask me via Twitter at AdamNorrisAP. Thank you guys very much for watching, and have a good day.